Hi, this is Nick Freitas with Making the Argument. We've got a great show for you today. This one's a little bit different. We were invited by the Family Foundation of Virginia to go and speak to students as part of their Worldview Equipped series. So this was a chance for high school students, college students to come and ask questions about the issues that they're confronted with so that we can equip them with the arguments that they need to advocate for the principles they believe in. And it was a wide range of topics, everything from government policy, economics, transgenderism. I mean, you name it, they had questions on it, and we had a great time dialoguing with these students. So enjoy the show. Well, no, thank you guys. Thank you to the Family Foundation for having me. I appreciate that you are going through a course on worldview right now. I wish it's a course that more people would go through, especially people that end up running for elected office. You would be shocked at the number of people that serve in positions of power, making decisions on things that affect the lives of millions of people that really have no concept of what they believe at a fundamental level. And so the fact that you guys are actually asking those important questions is really important. Like, I can't emphasize that part enough. It's significantly important to understand the foundation of why you believe what you believe. One of the quotes I really like from C.S. Lewis, where when he was talking about his Christianity, and he was saying that I don't simply believe in, or he was talking about how he believes in Christ like he believes in the sun, not just because he sees it, but through it he sees everything else. And so understanding the foundational roots of what you believe, why you believe it, is critical, because that will then inform every other decision that you have to make within life. And obviously when you're in a position in politics, it affects the way you look at policy. And so here's what I want to do. And this is kind of a variation of some other talks I've given before. So I'll just talk a little bit about what I like to call the worldview discussion and the concept of presuppositionalism. Which, if you think that sounds cool and intelligent, it is, and I didn't come up with it. All right? But I do think it's really important with respect to how you engage with other people. How do you actually share ideas? Because one of the biggest problems that we have right now is anytime we talk about anything, there's the threat of offense. And offense is never used as, gosh, I'm offended by that. I should probably think more about why that offends me, and then understand, and then be able to give an explanation for why there may be offense associated with that, and what potential discussions could we have to alleviate that or address the sort of problems that cause the offense in the first place. No, that's not the conversation that happens. It's, I'm offended, shut up. Right? That's generally how that goes. And because I'm offended, you don't have a right to say anything else, you don't have a right to have an opinion, or because you fall into a particular group. Right? It's the victim categorization on everything. And you get this a lot with critical theory and things like that. So understanding what your worldview is, how to properly discuss with other people, I want to go into that. And then I want to take questions. So the most difficult questions that you find about your faith, about politics, about just sociology, whatever it is, ask me those questions. Because if you don't, I'm going to ask you questions, and I'm going to force you to defend what it is you believe, and I'm not going to be nice about it. I actually did a whole series like this. I'm about to do another one with about 200 college students. And it's interesting because on the flyer, it just says Fight Club with Delegate Nick Freitas. Right? All the other breakout sessions have a description of what they're doing. Mine just says, in fact, they tried to change mine. They're like, well, we'd like to call it a persuasion. I'm like, okay, cool, you can call it that. I won't do it. Well, what will it take it for you to do it? You have to put Fight Club with Delegate Nick Freitas. They're like, what if someone asks us about it? I said, easy. You tell them, nobody talks about Fight Club. Right? You just show up, and we'll see what happens. Right? So, and the whole concept with that is this idea of putting you in a position, and this is the environment you want that position, where you're forced to defend what it is you believe. This is sparring. Because out there, that's real. And if you're not practicing the fight, if you're not practicing the discussion, if you're not practicing the argument in a safe environment, you're not going to be prepared the first time you get hit when you go out there. And I'm telling you right now, you guys are inheriting a world that I didn't even think was possible 10, 15 years ago. The sort of things you're having to defend, I never dreamed of having to defend. And so it's become even more important that you feel prepared, because It used to be that you could defend a controversial topic, but both people understood that, okay, this is a controversial topic and we're going to go at each other and whatnot, but then we can still part as friends. That's not the world anymore. We are increasingly getting to a situation where if you don't agree with me, that makes you a bad, evil person, and there are social, economic, and professional consequences to be paid for not believing the right thing. And so whereas before, when I would defend something at your age, there might be mild inconvenience or being uncomfortable in the process. For you, there's going to be actual consequences. You could actually be running into a world within your lifetime where you see actual persecution. And I'm not talking about the sort of persecution right now that people on the right of the church complain about, which bears no resemblance to the sort of persecution that people, Christians and others, are dealing with all over the world. I'm talking about significant persecution. And there's a very interesting discussion that Jordan Peterson gives, who, by the way, is an agnostic. But Jordan Peterson has a class, and when he's teaching psychology, he likes to tell people, he goes, I'm willing to believe that most of you think that if you were growing up in 1930s Germany, you would have been the one standing up to the Nazis, hiding Jewish children in your basement. He goes, the first part of this class is to teach you that no, you wouldn't have. You would have gone along with it. You would have gone along with it with the next pressure. The second part of this class is to teach you how to not be that person. And so I'm adamant about this because it really does start off with the intellectual component. It really starts off with having that deep moral conviction and understanding that whether, especially with your faith is not just an intellectual conviction, it is a relationship with Jesus Christ. You have to understand that. The next part is understanding that if something is correct and it is right and it is true, then it is worth standing for, it is worth fighting for, even if you're the last one to do it, even if it costs you something to do it. And we have been overwhelmingly spoiled in the United States because we do live in relative freedom and prosperity compared to the rest of the world, and certainly compared with world history. As much as people want to talk about all the bad things that has happened in the United States, and there are plenty of things to talk about, one of the questions that I like to turn back on people is I like to ask them, compared to what? Because if you're comparing it to an ideal, yes, everything falls short of the ideal. And that doesn't mean the ideal is not worth fighting for, but everything falls short of it within human history. But if you're comparing it to what's gone on in the rest of the world, we've got it pretty good here. No matter who you are, we've got it pretty good here. But as we start to see the cultural shift that all of us are witnessing within the United States, you could say that a shared worldview that most people in the United States used to appreciate, the idea that there was such a thing as objective truth, there was such a thing as objective morality. We might have disagreements, but ultimately there was something that we were all accountable to, and that was the truth. And that has slowly and steadily been replaced with things like postmodernism, deconstructionism, critical theory, where now all of a sudden there is no objective truth. There is no objective moral reality. There is oppressors and there is oppressed, and everything falls within the realm of class, race, sexual orientation, or sex itself. And those things determine for you what is right and what is wrong. There is no objective standard that you can appeal to. And the job of your generation is going to be fight against that and fight for the idea that there is such a thing as truth. And truth, far from being merely something that constricts, is actually a liberating concept. All right, so I'll get off my soapbox here, at least for a moment. What I want to do right now is I want to take, let me back up one more thing. Presuppositionalism, because I promised you I was going to talk about that. So I don't want to jump into questions without actually telling you the method of engagement. So, any of you ever heard of Cornelius Van Til, Greg Bahnsen? Any of those Christian apologists? Okay. So, in the Christian apologetic method, you have what you sometimes refer to as evidentiary apologetics, right? Using the deductive method to stack up evidence to determine whether or not you think God exists, there's objective morality, or things like that. The presuppositional method really is focused around this idea that every single worldview, every single one, whether you call yourself an atheist, a Christian, a Muslim, an agnostic, whatever it is, every single worldview is ultimately predicated on faith at its starting point. Now, if you're agnostic or atheist, they'll combat that. They'll say, well, no, that's not right. I just rely on reason. Do you have faith in reason? Okay, yeah. Why do you have faith in reason? Well, because I can see it. Oh, so you have faith in your senses. Do you have... Well, no, it's induction. Oh, so you have faith in induction, right? It doesn't matter where you go with this. Every starting point of a worldview relies on faith. And anybody that tells you that their worldview does not rely on faith is betraying something, right? They're cheating a little bit. Because even if they say they only rely on reason, or they only rely on logic, or they only rely on their senses, there's still an element of faith in that thing which they're relying upon in order to interpret everything else in reality. And so the question is, as Bonson always brings up, is when you look at that fundamental starting point of your worldview, what provides the necessary preconditions of intelligibility for everything else, right? Does that starting point provide you a mechanism to actually make sense of reality? And I know this sounds kind of uber intellectual. It's not. It's really basic if you think about it, right? All of us, when you're interpreting what's going on, from what you chose to wear this morning, to showing up here, to listening to me, to what you're going to do tomorrow, to what you're going to eat for lunch, all of that requires you being able to use your senses, reason, logic, in order to come to rational conclusions about what you're going to do and what you believe. So when you look at that foundational point of your worldview, does it provide the necessary preconditions to be able to do everything else? Does it actually provide a framework where you can explain not only the basic things that you're going to do throughout your life, but the fundamental questions of meaning, purpose, why I'm here, what I'm doing? And I will tell you completely unapologetically, I believe Christianity provides that. Now, when you go and you talk to people about these things, a lot of times when you get into discussions, there's this tendency to do this thing where it's like, okay, you're going to leave, we got 3 islands. You're on one island over here. You're a Christian, you're a conservative, that's your whatever. And then you got this island over here, right? Maybe it's atheism, maybe it's agnosticism, whatever. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the island in the middle where logic is at. And that's where we're going to debate all these things to see which worldview stacks up. That is a fundamentally flawed way of looking at the nature of the debate. Because the first question you should ask somebody is, well, how do you even get to logic in the first place? What in your worldview actually provides the necessary preconditions for logic? Because everything in the world is nothing but time plus chance plus matter. Well, then why do we have any sort of assurance that logic is going to work? Right? So that's an example of a presuppositional question that gets someone to open up within assumptions about their own worldview. And this applies to a lot of things. I'm going to give you one example of it, and then I'm going to move on to your questions. How many of you have heard the argument, my body, my choice? Everybody has heard that argument, right? It's one of the most common ones that you hear against the pro-life movement. In fact, as someone like me that has a very liberty-oriented streak with the way I look at government, I actually break with some of my conservatives on certain issues from time to time, but I'm adamantly pro-life, and I'll explain why in a moment. They'll either get that argument where it's my body, my choice, I should be able to make my choice. How dare anyone tell me what to do with my body? And you'll see that argument being made by the left. You'll see that argument being made sometimes by libertarians. So here's the question. Before we get into well, wait, but the baby's also a body. Or, but wait, you're still taking in a human life. Before we get into any of that, the question I like to ask when somebody says my body, my choice is, why does that matter? And you get this offended look, like, what do you mean, why does that matter? Of course that matters. Okay, yeah, I understand that, of course that matters. What I want you to do is explain why it is your body, and if it is, why should it be your choice? I know why I think what I think. I want to know why you think what you think. I want to understand what are your presuppositions you have taken into that statement when you make it in support of a pro-choice argument. Are you saying that you have ownership of your body? If you have ownership of your body, then presumably you also have responsibility for your actions. Are you saying that your body has inherent worth simply because it exists? Well, that's a presupposition as well, right? You haven't proven anything when you say my body, my choice. You're carrying that assumption into the argument. And the two biggest assumptions you're carrying is that you have ownership and responsibility of your body and its actions, and that your body has inherent value and worth. And therefore, somebody else should not come in and compel you to do something with your body that you don't want. Now, if you believe in those two presuppositions, here's the question. Who does it apply to? Does it just apply to you? Is it literally my body, your choice, or does that apply to anybody? Because if it applies to anybody, well, now there's some other assumptions we have to take into effect, right? There's other ideas we have to take into account. Because if everybody's body has inherent value, and everybody is responsible for their actions, well, then when we look at the decision with respect to abortion, then we have to say at least in 97% of cases, what happened is two people who own and have responsibility over their bodies made a conscientious decision to engage in an activity that they know could bring about another body, which they've already acknowledged has inherent value. And now they're saying that that body should not have value because it's infringing on what somebody else wants to do over here. But you've already destroyed your own argument. The moment you said, my body, my choice, you brought certain assumptions to that argument that make it impossible for you to say that it is perfectly justifiable to destroy another innocent human life. That's what it means to take a presuppositional approach to a question. And so many times where I see people that genuinely believe what we do get in trouble in these discussions is that we just assume that we all at least have some basic commitment to truth or objective morality. And we end up talking around each other. And we end up getting mad at each other. If you can first take a step back and ask the question, why do you think that way? Or if what you just said is true, doesn't that mean that this is also true? If you can open them up within their own presuppositions, you will have a much more productive conversation. Because one of the things I have learned the hard way is that if you were simply having a discussion to win an argument, that's pride. And I do not see a lot of good things happening as a result of pride. I was just listening to a sermon the other day, and they said something truly profound. I thought it was very profound. They said, if your quest for justice is fueled by bitterness and hatred, then even if you achieve justice, you will be left with bitterness and hatred. If your quest for justice is fueled by love and compassion, then when you achieve it, you will still have love and compassion. It's one of the other things that I really want to impress upon you today. If this is all about proving to other people how much smarter you are than they are, you're not fulfilling a biblical mandate. You're not actually achieving anything that's truly useful. It has to be about more than that. You have to actually care about the person that you disagree with. 1 Peter says it best, right? 3:15. First, sanctify Christ in your hearts and always be prepared to give a response for the hope that is in you, but to do so with gentleness and respect. And I will be the first to tell you that there are many times where I have a lot of difficulty with the gentleness and respect part. I mean, the environment I grew up in was largely military oriented. We were hard on each other. We were overly sarcastic. It's kind of, and I'm not saying that that's always bad, but I can tell in my own life there's been times where I have an opportunity to have a discussion with someone, and as my wife sometimes looks at me, and Tina will say, she goes, was your intention to make someone aware of a good idea or to demonstrate Christ's love in a particular situation, or was it to completely intellectually destroy them? To which I look back at her and be like, can it be both? and chances are it can't. Most times it can't be. Okay, so as you guys think about the various questions you want to ask, and again, if you don't ask me questions, I'm going to start asking them back, and that's when it's going to get crazy. All right? Because I want you to have that opportunity to do the sparring, to go back and forth, okay? But as you're thinking about that, that's what I want you to be considering. How do I have a productive conversation with somebody, not just how do I win a debate? Because this is the last thought I'll leave you with before we get to that. One of the things I've found, and one of the I won't get into all the details, but there was a time where I was debating with somebody about the existence of God. And he started to go off on this tangent where he said, well, do you believe that if you commit suicide, you go to hell? And I responded with, that is a red herring fallacy argument that has nothing to do with either the existence or non-existence of God. And so why don't you stay on topic? Now, I was technically correct. I was also a prideful fool in that moment. I was so concerned with demonstrating to him how smart I was that I never thought to ask the question, why did you ask me that? Because if I had, that would have given me the insight into what he was dealing with in his own life, the struggles that he was going through, the sense of abandonment that he felt, the sense of complete disillusionment, the sense of frustration that he had with the church and with faith in general. I could have had that conversation and actually gotten to something that might have been able to provide some sort of healing, but I was too concerned with being the smartest guy in the room. Don't do that. You will be shocked at the number of times that there is a very, very thin intellectual veneer covering up a mountain of pain and personal suffering. And your job is to never marginalize the suffering, experience, or pain someone else has gotten through.